ora, I'm Nat Waran, and I'm the director of the Companion Animals New Zealand's A Good Life for Animals Centre, and I'm your host for this discussion. And I'm extremely lucky to be joined by three eminent panel members. So first of all, Dr. Arnja Dale. She's an animal behaviour and welfare expert and the chief scientist for the SPCA, as well as being the Companion Animals chair for the Animal Welfare Subcommittee. So welcome, Arnja.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We now have Dr. Natalie Lloyd, who is a companion animal veterinarian with a special interest in cat health and welfare, and who until very recently was the president of the companion animal veterinary branch of the New Zealand Veterinary Association. Welcome, Natalie.
Kia ora. Thank you, Nat. Very happy to be here.
And last, and certainly by no means least, we've got Dr. Gosia Zobel. She's a senior animal welfare scientist and the Companion Animals New Zealand Animal Welfare Programs Manager. Welcome to you, Gosia.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm pleased to be here.
Okay, right, so here we go. We're going to kick off with a question that's very central to our panel discussion to help us to get underway. And this question is for Arnja. So Arnja, why do you think that cats are such popular companion animals in New Zealand?
Because cats are absolutely wonderful. They are so smart and so interactive, and a fantastic family pet. But it's just important to note that we are talking today about owned cats in New Zealand. And as Natalie said, there's about 1.2 million owned cats in New Zealand. There are millions of other cats in New Zealand as well. So the latest research, which was some years ago, indicates possibly around 200,000 stray cats in New Zealand. So what stray cats are is stray cats live around human habitation and either rely directly or indirectly on humans for their needs. Then we all have another category of cats, and these are feral cats. And feral cats essentially live in the bush, very, very difficult to see, and essentially have other legislation that looks after how they are managed. So there are three distinct categories of cats, and today we are talking about owned cats.
Great, thank you, Arnja. That's really useful for us to just keep in mind as we go through this panel discussion. Okay, so obviously Arnja has also pointed out the amazing nature of cats and why people really love having cats in their lives. But Gosia, from a Good Life Centre research perspective, can you tell us a little bit about what New Zealand cat owners have told us about the relationship that they have with their cats and why cats are so important to them?
Yeah, no, I think that's a it's an interesting and a very broad question, Nat. I love bringing in the data. So I think when I'm thinking about this, I would say, let's look at one of our most recent surveys that we did, and we had over 2,000, almost 2,000 cat owners contribute. So that in itself, people were very keen to tell us about their cats. 98% of those people told us that they thought their cat was quite or very happy. And I think that's saying something. I guess it's maybe unsurprising, but the more interesting thing is that over 1,800 of those people, again, most of them, told us that they thought that they were the reason that their cat was happy. So though they're having their companionship to their cat was as important as food and almost as important as patting them. So I think these responses are very, very telling. New Zealand cat owners feel that they have a very good relationship with their cats. They know what they want, and they themselves contribute a great deal to their cat's well-being.
Oh, yeah. So Natalie, I mean, obviously people care about their cats a lot, but what was also interesting is that over the last few Companion Animal New Zealand surveys, we saw that cats were least likely or less likely to receive regular health care than dogs. So just from a veterinary perspective, why do you think this is the case, and what impact would that have on their welfare?
Yeah, it's a great question, and probably one that we could spend about 3 days talking about, but I would kind of separate it out into 2 different areas. And one of them is just recognition of signs of poor health in cats is not as easy as it is with dogs. So we know that cats have evolved as being both predators and prey, and because of those evolutionary the evolutionary background, it's not as easy for us to understand when they are not well. So if we think about something which is incredibly common like osteoarthritis, and we know that that becomes a lot more common as a cat ages, often we're not seeing those classic signs that we see in dogs where they might be limping or they're not wanting to go on their walks. In cats, we just see a general slowing down. And so that's just kind of perceived to be that cat getting older. So that sign that those cats are showing us that there is something not right with their health is being misinterpreted as just natural cat behavior, and in that case, natural cat aging behavior. So I think a big part of it is actually recognizing that the cats aren't well. I think another challenge that we experience is when we do see that those cats are not well, the process of getting that cat into the vet clinic, and then the experience of the cat at the vet clinic, can be a negative one for both feline caregivers and for the cats themselves. And so I think if people are perceiving that it is going to be stressful for the cat, either getting to the clinic or at the clinic, then they're going to weigh that up against, do I actually need to seek medical advice? And certainly the evolution of cat-friendly clinic schemes, a lot more education around veterinary team approaches to cats, how we interact with cats has changed a lot. And that's been a very big piece of improving feline welfare and the feline experience at the clinic. And then finally, we know that the way that we medicate conditions often involves tablets and liquids, and there's been a lot of work looking at how that impacts the bond between the cat and the people that it lives with. And certainly, one study that was done by the International Society for Feline Medicine, which had a large pool of respondents over the pandemic, 54% of people said that tableting or medicating their cat damaged their relationship with their cat. So if we're struggling to see disease, and when we're struggling to seek veterinary advice, and then we're struggling to medicate that disease, you can see there how that can all contribute to us not being quite as engaged with healthcare for our cats.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Yes. Okay, so we're just going to move off the health part of it a little bit and talk about, this is a question for you, Arnja. Because we've just talked about how plentiful cats are and also how valued they are by their owners, we've also talked about the issues that cats face in relation to perhaps being given the best health care that they need. Are there other welfare concerns or challenges that face cats and cat owners in New Zealand?
Yes, there are a number of challenges. Unfortunately, in New Zealand, we predominantly have cats that roam, unlike other places in the world, I might add. And so when cats are allowed to roam, they are at risk of getting run over by cars, getting attacked by dogs, fighting with other cats and spreading diseases, causing nuisance to their communities, getting inadvertently poisoned, getting inadvertently in traps. So actually, there are a number of risks with having roaming cats, and that is why we want all cats on laps, and we want safe and happy cats at home. And so we support, from a welfare perspective, purely from the cat's perspective, we actually would like to have cats kept on your own property, similar to how dogs are. So it's actually quite a significant behavioural change for a number of New Zealanders. There are other benefits as well for the wider community in relation to reduction in nuisance complaints, reduction in the spread of toxoplasmosis, which obviously impacts our pastoral species and our marine mammals, and also having a reduction in human health as well, obviously with things like that. but it also is much more beneficial for your cat to be happy and healthy at home. All cats on laps is what we ideally like. The issue is because this is a behavioural change for New Zealanders, we have to make sure that the physical and psychological welfare of those cats is looked after. It needs to be very high. Can also help with the bonding that Gosia talked about before when you actually have cats at home. So, for example, I have a cat that is kept on my property, and we have fences up with rollers around the top of them, which were very cheap and easy. We just did a homemade equivalent of ones that you can purchase, which means that our cat is protected from all the risks that roaming cats have. And we engage with our cat all the time in terms of playing with it and meeting its physical health and behavioural needs, but really looking after that psychological aspect and making sure that the cat is exercising and having a good life. So it is very, very possible, and there's lots of different options that are available, but it does involve a shift in terms of how we actually look after our cats and think about our cats. Similar to how it was when the Dog Control Act came in 1996, we also need to go on this journey with cats in New Zealand because of the risk that I talked about before, but also the significant risk of predation. And the research is very clear that cats have a significant impact on predating our native wildlife. And so we need to be responsible cat owners and do what we can to protect both our wildlife, our farm species, our marine mammals, risks of the cat itself, and make sure they have a good life, which means, from my perspective, making sure that they're happy and healthy at home.
Great, thanks, Arnja. So I'm just going to shift on to Gosia, because I know that Companion Animals New Zealand is doing a fair bit of research, just really to understand New Zealanders' points of view and to look at this change, which, as you say, would be quite significant, and how that would impact on the cats, but also the cat caregivers. So Gosia, I wonder if you could tell us about the research that is being undertaken at the moment.
Specifically in the indoor-outdoor discussion that
I think
Arnja was
both,
just talking about?
I think the indoor-outdoor discussion and transitioning, what's actually happening.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when Arnja was talking there. I was sort of thinking about the most recent numbers, and I hope I have them right. But we had in another survey that we did via UC Davis. They had a great indoor-outdoor survey already available that they had run in California, and so we pulled that over here, and over 1,500 people participated in that. And the key thing was that I think it was 50% of people felt that in order for a cat to have a good life, there must be either some or all the time outdoor access for their cat. And that went up to 60% when we asked them specifically about a catio. So it's an interesting point, because I think we're up against a bit of challenge to be able to get those people across the line that are thinking that roaming is equal to a good life. That said, there's some other really interesting things that came out of that survey, as well as a study that we're currently running, and one of which was, in that study, a small number of participants actually reported having already transitioned to cat indoors. And this was because of things like a perceived danger from having just moved into an area with traffic and that sort of thing, but also health concerns for their cat. And then some people also mentioned the environmental component. And most of those people were expressed that it went well. I mean, they said that there might be some things that they'd like to discuss with us at length about the things that didn't go well about it, but that it went well and their cat was still indoors. So that actually triggered some follow-up work and it's currently running, so I can't tell you too much about the details of it, but we're running a really cool study where owners that were already interested in bringing their cat indoors volunteered to be, basically have their cats have monitors and have they would be writing a daily diary for us. And it's been fascinating seeing the behavior changes in the cats, and some cats have adjusted very quickly. and other cats, the owners are still reporting to us that they're working with the behavior changes. They're having problems keeping the cats inside and things like that. And I think that the reason that we're doing that type of research is that we need that kind of information. We need to know, what works, what did owners have to do to their houses in order to let us, or in order to bring their cats, which cats just weren't very good candidates for it, what kind of situations weren't very good situations. We had one person tried to do this around a major surgery, and we've kind of now realized that doing something like this is also a major thing on your life, and so trying it around something else in your life isn't good. So I mean, I guess the moral of what I'm trying to say is that I think it's obviously a very complicated subject. People are very passionate, and we are, through our surveys, through our research, we're bringing in all of that information and trying to condense the information about what could work for people that are interested in going forward with moving cats indoors, but also information about how to do something like a contained outdoor enclosure like Arnja was describing, because then it's sort of the best of both worlds. So yeah, watch this space, basically. I'm sorry I can't tell you much more about the results, but yeah, in a few months we'll have more info.
Can I just jump in and just comment on that, Gosia? Because I think that one of the things that we certainly recommend is when you have an adult cat that is used to a certain lifestyle, changing that is quite difficult. It needs to be done over a long period of time, and actually a huge amount of enrichment being provided within the home. Yes. It's much easier and much more successful when you're getting a new cat, hopefully from one of the rescues, because we're inundated with cats. It's kitten season. We have an absolute crisis of cats in New Zealand. SPCA takes in about 35,000 animals a year. 80% of them are cats. So cats are a massive issue, whichever way you look. We are just one, we have 30 shelters, but, there are over 300 other rescues, possibly more, possibly higher. They come and go, so it's a little bit difficult to keep an accurate track of them. They're all overrun with cats. So this is it's a significant issue. But if you are getting a new cat, that's when it's really easy to do that transition, because this is the new home for that animal, and this is what it is. And I think that there's three differences in relation to keeping cats happy and safe at home. You can have them indoors, completely indoors. You can have a catio if you're able to provide that, or you can let them have outdoor access but keep them on your property. Now that's my favorite. I like that one. That's what we've been able to do in our property. But depending on your living environment, there are lots of different options that are available to you. So it's not black or white. We have a really good guide called Safe and Happy Cats at Home, which provide a lot of detail around what you need to do for cats if you are keeping them on your property in a catio, having that outdoor access in a catio or inside. And I think it really depends on the risks that are around for your cat to which one is the most appropriate, particularly if there are a whole lot of native species around and they come into your garden. You may choose to have a catio, but you may not be able to afford to build one, or it may be complicated because you don't own the house. So there are lots of different options around, and there's a lot of support material for people. So they're certainly not in a vacuum with making these changes.
Yeah. And can I just say there's actually a fourth option there, Arnja, because a few of our participants have cats on leashes.
Yeah, leashes are really interesting, but again, it's a slow transition, and lots of them just flop down. But if you do it well and make it really positive, just like when you muzzle train a dog, and really positive, you lots of people will take their cats for walks, though not nearly as much as people taking their dogs for a walk.
No.
If I can jump in there, I think I think the way that we approach cats on leads is very, very different to the way that we approach dogs on leads. Okay, because we want, part of taking those cats out is to allow them, that environmental stimulation that they get when they go outside. And I think understanding that when we're putting cats on leads, we're not taking them for a walk, we're putting them on leads and we're taking them outside so that they can experience that outdoor environment. And I think that's the distinction, is that, you know, I don't think I've ever heard of any feline caregiver actually effectively walking their cat on a lead. But if you've got a big long lead and you've got a harness, yeah, I mean, look, there, you know, I'm sure we'll find it on YouTube, because you can find whatever you want on YouTube, right? But yeah, I think that's the real difference. And of course, you know, the mantra to every vet student going through vet school is that cats are not small dogs, and certainly when it comes to, you know, how we exercise them and how we provide or meet their behavioural needs, it is very different to how we approach dogs.
It is, but also you talked about the, you know, going outside for the experience and the smelling and the, you know, that part. Absolutely 100% agree. But also that's the same for dogs too. I keep saying I'm going for a walk. I'm actually going for a sniffathon. I'm not really going for, I mean, there's exercise, but, you know, I stop, you know, every few meters so that we can smell. So, you know, we also need to remember that about dogs too, I think. Sorry, Nat, that was a sidebar.
No, it's great.
Cats here.
I can see there's a lot of passion involved in this. I think it will be interesting, just bringing it back to the research, to find out a little bit more about what it means to the cats, whether they're transitioning, or indeed for kittens, you know, who are all different, all individual. Natalie, you were talking about your own experience around this, you know, with the best will in the world. Sometimes cats, even when kittens, when they've been brought up inside, you know, it might not always work 100% for all of them.
Yeah, so you can see probably on my background there that there are two pussycats that live in my house, and myself and my husband, you know, we have a very strong motivation to give our cats a good life, and to keep them contained. And my little chocolate Burmese, who you can see over my right shoulder here, you know, she is very comfortable living a contained life. But the little dark seal boy, he has a very, very strong predatory drive, and we need to provide a lot more interaction with him than we do for our other cats. So even though as a kitten he came into our household and the plan was to keep him as a contained cat, because he has that incredibly strong predatory drive, you know, we certainly recognize that he needs a lot more interaction with us, and a lot more outlets to express what is natural for cats. And they will all have that predatory drive in differing levels. And I think we need to accept that for some cats, regardless of whether we are transitioning them or whether we are keeping them indoors, you know, from the age of a kitten, it is going to be easier than for other cats. And certainly, you know, there are ways that we can manage that. And with Boris, we've done a combination of everything that you've mentioned, Arnja. We've done indoors, we've done outdoors, we've had him on a lead, we've done everything. But I think, you know, from my perspective, some of the language that we use is really important. And I hear kind of the term enrichment a lot. And I think actually what we need to understand, if we are going to make these changes to the way our cats live, that we actually need to understand that they are needs. They are not an added benefit. They are needs. And certainly that was my experience with my cats, because when those needs are not met, it doesn't just impact negatively on that cat, it impacts negatively on everyone in the household with that cat. And so what we saw was this incredible frustration when we weren't able to meet those needs. That would then be directed as far as aggression towards the other cat in the house. This 4-kilo cat would pounce on our 32-kilo Hungarian Vizsla, who is terrified to kind of walk down the hallway because, you know, there would be this flying, frustrated cat expressing his predatory behaviour. And so that predatory behaviour, you know, obviously that is the challenge of cats, and certainly that impact on our natural wildlife is what we really want to protect the wildlife as well as our cats against, because there are downsides to predating outside for sure. But I just think it's important that we understand that not every cat is going to adopt this lifestyle in the same way, and what we need to be able to do is understand that they have a need to live their life in this way, and that need is going to look different across the cats, and it's certainly not an optional extra to provide them with enrichment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to change tack now, because obviously, Arnja, you have talked about just how many unowned cats there are, and obviously we have various welfare challenges for those cats. They might be living an outdoor lifestyle, but I think, as you already pointed out, it's not always a positive thing for them. So there's been a lot of emphasis on desexing programs to try to help with cat overpopulation. So first of all, Gosia, can you just tell us a little bit about what the Companion Animals New Zealand census tells us about the practices of cat owners regarding desexing?
I will caution, the numbers are just being finalized, but we're pretty confident that the numbers this year are much better than what was reported in 2020. With basically the cats that were being discussed by the owners in this census, 96% of them had been desexed, which is phenomenal. And most of the people, so when I say most, probably about 70%, cited the reason for having the cats desexed was to prevent unwanted litters. That said, about half the people said that actually one of the key things is the fact they didn't have really a choice about it because they got the cat desexed. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but almost taking the choice out of it is good, because people don't really, they don't care that the cat has been desexed. They do also, about a third of the people also mentioned that they were happy about the desexing because it was preventing unwanted behaviors. We didn't ask them specifically about what those behaviors would be, but they felt that by having the cat desexed, it would have that. So if I can say one more thing, there was an interesting sort of a comparison that I can make, is that a third of the cats that people were talking about that hadn't been desexed, so this is about specifically those 4% of cats, the ones that hadn't been desexed at the time of this, most of the owners had just got those cats. So what we're hoping is that if that attitude is, that desexing is very important, that if we had followed up, perhaps we could follow up with those people a year from now and say, have you desexed your cat? I mean, I think that would be a really interesting piece of information.
Oh, I mean, it's good to hear that there's certainly been a positive change over the last, 3 or 4 years since our last census. But absolutely. If I just come to you, Arnja, then it's an interesting one, because you talk about just, these shelters that are full of kittens. And there's a kitten season when there's this massive kind of, influx of kittens into shelters, and you often see quite a lot of feral kittens wandering around the roads. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't make it. There's little bodies on the roads as well. So, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about how effective you believe these existing spay-neutering programs, these different approaches that have been taken for controlling cat overpopulation have been?
Yes. Of course. I'm just going to correct you, Natalie. There would be stray cats if you've seen them wandering around the roads, more than likely, rather than ferals. It is a little bit confusing when you read the literature, because in America, stray and feral cats are feral cats, and everywhere else they're not. So I always try to make that distinction. So desexing is incredibly important, both for the health of the individual cat and to prevent unwanted pregnancies. The SPCA at the moment spends about $4 million a year on desexing cats and dogs. Sorry, dogs are included within that, and of course dogs are more expensive than desexing cats. So we advocate for early desexing of cats to prevent unwanted pregnancies, right? So our focus is population management, and so for that individual cat there are a number of benefits with desexing. However, if we look at the efficacy of desexing programs, they do have a significant benefit. But if you do random trap neuter return programs, and that caveat has to be that they're not near any wildlife sensitive areas, and they must have someone looking after them, say for example a colony carer. They help, but the most effective desexing programs around the world and also in New Zealand is managed targeted trap neuter return. So that essentially means you look at your data, you look at a high incoming suburb. So we did this in the Auckland region, and we chose one suburb and literally went house by house, street by street, trapping stray cats, asking owners if we can desex their cats if they weren't desexed, and systematically working through a whole area. You have to come back and sweep again though, because it doesn't prevent it, because obviously cats will come back into an area where there is the ability to have their needs met either directly or indirectly by humans. So that is the most effective way of doing it. Managed targeted trap neuter return. We're about to launch another a new one out on the west coast of the South Island. Again, managed targeted trap neuter return. Incredibly expensive, incredibly high resource intensive, but the most effective way in terms of reducing incoming animals from that particular suburb and having much better welfare outcomes. Or every single desexing helps though prevent unwanted litters. So all of them are good, but the research is very clear that if you just compare different trap neuter return programs around the world, the research doesn't show a clear linkage necessarily with one of the common methods of assessing effectiveness, which is incoming animals, cats into that shelter and kittens. Managed targeted trap neuter return does, and it's the most effective way. So that is the method that we use. But what you need to do is, if there is a stray cat that is socialized, or kittens that can be socialized, they should be removed from the population. They should be rehomed. It's only stray cats that have not socialized behavior, that if their needs are being met within a community, it's not near any wildlife sensitive areas, that we would ever consider putting that back, as long as someone is taking charge of that cat. Now, it's important to realize we're only dealing with stray cats here, where again, we're not talking about the feral cats that comes under different legislation in the bush. But with stray cats, there's different ownership models as well. So some people will actually consider them community cats, and lots of houses will feed them, and others don't. And some are colonies, some are single cats. So there is a huge variety, and when we plump stray cats as a category, there's a huge variety in what we actually see, and we see a wide variety in health conditions as well. So those that have much more of an association with people and come into their homes but don't live there and just move around, they tend to have, as a whole, better welfare than those that don't actually have any involvement with humans but may eat rubbish and things like that. So that do rely on us but don't have an association with them. So it's quite a broad category here. Either way, you've got two choices. If you need to manage a stray cat situation, you have two choices. You can trap and kill, or you can trap, rehome if possible, desex, microchip, do an ear tip to show that it has been desexed easily from visualizing it, and returning it, provided that neighborhood is looking after that cat and it's not near any wildlife sensitive areas. So these are essentially the two options. We know that if you trap and kill, and we've seen this a number of times in New Zealand and internationally, what happens there is it produces a vacuum effect, and new cats just come in and take over that area. So it's just this constant battle. So what we need is everybody to be a responsible cat owner. We need everybody to desex their cats. We need everybody to look after their cats. And ultimately, the long goal is that we don't have stray cats in New Zealand anymore, which are potentially feeding our feral cat population and we don't have feral cats anymore. So we only have cats on laps that are looked after and have a good life as possible.
Great, thank you. So just moving to our vet, Natalie, Arnja makes a very important point, which is about responsible guardianship. So people who have owned cats, making sure that they are desexed at an early age, so that they're not adding to this overpopulation problem. So from your perspective, what happens? I mean, it seems to me a very simple message.
Yeah, and I think there have been lots of changes in veterinary healthcare, for companion animals certainly over the last, 10 to 20 years, and we really are kind of moving towards individualized healthcare. If we look at, international guidelines for vaccination or for worming treatment, and even for, how we manage reproductive capacity in companion cats and dogs, there are some changes there, but the evidence is still very clear, and all of the the experts in this area, it is still very consistent that the recommendations for desexing of cats are that is going to be, when you take your cat into your vet, that is what we are going to recommend, and that is for the best health of the cat. If we look at incidence of diseases like mammary tumours and uterine disease, it is still very clear that this is the right thing to do for the cat, and as Arnja has talked about, this is the right thing to do for the population, and we are still recommending that we approach that desexing as early as possible, and that is because we know that cats can reach reproductive maturity very young, and then they can have up to 4 litters a year, and they could have anywhere between kind of 6 and 12 or 14 kittens in a litter. And if we think about the impact that those kittens are going to make, certainly if they are abandoned on those stray colonies, which is generally where they're moving towards, then that is a significant contributor, to an unwanted cat population. And nobody working in the shelter and nobody working in the vet clinic want to have to be dealing with all of these unwanted kittens, because it takes a toll on the population, takes a toll on our native wildlife, and it takes a toll on the people who are working with those cats and trying to find solutions for them. And that is a really significant consideration for us as representatives of veterinarians. Generally, when people are not immediately keen to kind of embrace the thought of, those motivations are going to come from the fact that it seems like the right thing for that cat to have a litter. Might be that they feel that it is the right thing for their family to go through that experience of seeing the cat having kittens and then bringing those kittens up and then finding homes for them. Sometimes there will be some fear around general anaesthesia, and that's understandable. I mean, we all have a healthy awareness, and we should do, about there are risks associated with general anaesthesia, but in the case here, we are talking about a very young, fit, healthy animal, and these procedures are done all of the time. Certainly the risks of general anaesthesia and the surgeries involved in cats are very, very minimal now, and very well managed. So, look, any of those concerns that people have, they can be addressed really easily, and there is no need for a cat to have a litter to live a good life. It's, I guess, an emotional thing that we might feel, but really, there's no literature, there's no science that says that this is what a cat needs. And certainly from the perspective of the family experience, if anyone has gone through that, certainly having an entire female cat in the process of actually getting her pregnant, it's not a pleasant experience. An entire female cat on heat can be a very unpleasant housemate to live with. And then I think just, what we do with those kittens afterwards, and that kind of comes back to what the impact is on that stray cat population, and what the wider impact is of trying to manage those populations.
So, I mean, Gosia, from Companion Animals New Zealand's point of view, and most other animal welfare organisations and animal organisations such as New Zealand Veterinary Association, what would be the best thing that responsible guardians should be doing for their cats?
Broadly, or talking about desexing?
Yeah, just broadly. What's a responsible cat guardian? I mean, what's the first things that they really should be doing?
Well,
that
I mean,
obviously would be a good thing.
I mirror the discussion that was just had. I think the number one thing is desexing. If I can bring it, maybe a bit of a personal interest from the CAN's perspective, but if I can bring it to microchipping, I think microchipping is extremely important. And there's a bit of a positive. Our census has said that, over 600 currently our register says over 660,000 cats are microchipped, which is great, microchipped and registered. But there's a gap with that and the number of cats that are estimated to actually be microchipped based off our census. There's about a 20% discrepancy there. So there's people that are reporting having had their cat microchipped and not actually having it registered with us. And that's problematic just from a perspective of, there's just so many benefits to having a cat microchipped and registered. We can find it if we need, if you lose it, it prevents it from going into that stray population that Arnja was talking about. But I think if I can talk a little bit about there's still all these sort of perceptions about what's preventing people from kind of seeing that as a component of responsible pet care. And one of those things is that people really think that it's just not necessary. So, I mean, that's sort of, I guess, on us to have a little bit more on the messaging. There's some people are still thinking that it's just too expensive. And so they're not realizing, that it actually, for the amount of money that they could spend and that they could save in the long run by being able to find their cat, that it isn't that expensive. But an interesting point, and maybe Natalie wants to comment on this, is that the people in our census, there was 12% of our respondents said that their vets recommended microchipping. Just 12%. Right. So I think that there's a component there where it's not just onto the owners. I think, the vets have a component there as well to be pushing for it. I personally just went to my vet, and lovely person, I'm not going to mention who they are because they gave me a great discount, but they didn't scan my cat. They didn't ask if it was microchipped or anything of that sort. So there's something there. I don't know, Natalie, if you want to comment on that in terms of messaging or.
Yeah, look, I mean, as representatives of the companion animal vet branch of the New Zealand Vet Association, we very strongly support both microchipping and registration. And we do see that as, certainly one of the pillars of responsible cat guardianship. So I think I would struggle to understand why a vet didn't recommend microchipping. And from talking to vets every day in my day job, it is certainly something that they see as being an important part of being a responsible cat guardian. That said, the pressure in a 15-minute consult when you are faced with a new cat caregiver.
Exactly.
We, as I mentioned before, we are talking about individualised vaccination protocols. We are talking about individualised care around both management of internal and external parasites. We're talking about a comprehensive health check. We are now talking about a comprehensive check on whether we are meeting that cat's behavioural needs when it is living inside. We are talking about so many things that we need to cover in that time. And I think this is where, as veterinarians, we can do a lot better at utilising this incredible resource that we have in our clinic, which is our veterinary nurses and our veterinary technicians. And I think what a lot of clinics are doing now is they are moving the way those consults look more towards bringing in those kind of allied veterinary professionals to have a lot of those conversations that do not need to be vet specific. So I think from my perspective, the short answer there, Gosia, is that this is a conversation that can be had with anyone working in a vet clinic. And it may well be that while the vet is focusing on the specific health care and the veterinary side of advice for that animal, that advice is coming to them in the vet clinic, but maybe it is not just from the vet, it is actually everyone in the clinic that is delivering that information. And I think, as I say, that is the way that we should be moving, because we have these amazing people working in our clinic and we need to be using them as much as we can.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
If there's ever a reason to microchip a cat, is the number of cats that come into the SPCA and other shelters around New Zealand and worldwide, and they have an owner. They do, but you can't find the owner because they're not microchipped, or they are microchipped and their contact details are not up to date, or they were never registered on the companion animal register in the first place. And so that is why we would like to see microchipping being brought in for cats, so that we can actually have a higher return to owner rate, because they have owners. And this is a worldwide issue as well, where there isn't compulsory microchipping, because even when you have it, if you don't keep your details up to date, there's no point. So it's a really tricky one. And if people are letting their cats roam, cats will get lost, cats will get injured, they will end up at vet clinics, they will end up at animal welfare centres, and actually you really need to be able to contact the owner.
If I could just talk to a personal example where I saw the value of microchipping. It was when I was working in a clinic, and a cat had been hit by a car, and the people that hit the cat picked up the cat, brought it into the clinic. The cat was microchipped. We were able to contact that cat's family, and very quickly we could implement the healthcare that cat needed. Now, if we weren't able to find that cat's family, we were not able to do anything outside of, alleviate the immediate pain and suffering that animal was experiencing, and not actually able to do all of the things from a healthcare perspective that cat actually needed. So, it, like you say, Arnja, I mean, it works for the cat, it works for the family of the cat, it works for the, for the greater cat population, and it works for our society, doesn't it, for our communities?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, in saying all of that, what part is being played now through local government policy changes or legislation that might lead to supporting that sort of level of cat guardianship or responsible cat guardianship? So I'll start really with Arnja. You tell us a little bit about what you think is going on and how that's going to protect cat welfare.
Yeah, of course. So our number one priority is cat welfare, and looking after our native species and our farm species as well. So you can't just have one lens when you look at it, because it's a complex problem, and it actually is a New Zealand society problem. This isn't an SPCA problem. This isn't a CANS problem. This isn't a vet problem. This is a New Zealand society problem. And so one of the things that there's a lot of things that, when we talk about responsible cat ownership or guardianship, there's a huge amount of things that we always advocate. Always desex, always microchip, always have a relationship with your veterinarian, always do preventative healthcare. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. But one of the things that we need from our local and regional councils and central government is we need some leadership in this space, because at the moment there isn't leadership in this space. So we are one of the organisations, like probably all of us here, that submit in every single council and government consultation process where it is in relation to animals. And we've been part of the successful changes in 10 councils, which have brought in, most of them, desexing prior to 4 months of age and microchipping and registration of that microchip, which is fantastic. But when you talk to these councils, they think that we need central government leadership in this space. So we've been part of a group that have been advocating since 2014 for central government leadership in this space. And that's what we really actually need. Now, we've got our coalition leader, Christopher Luxon, that during the election campaign told us that they supported bringing in initiatives, bringing in legislation that actually supported cat welfare but protected our species. So a dual approach. However, there seems to have been a U-turn by the government, because there was a petition that was trying to achieve this by Erica Rowlands. And that was quite some time ago. So that was actually in 2021. And that was seen by the Environment Select Committee. Now, the Environment Select Committee reported on this in August 2023, strongly recommending the government to take leadership and actually bring in compulsory microchipping and desexing, and look after our native wildlife species as well. In October 2024, the government finally responded, which is actually only meant to be 60 days. But anyway, aside from that, they responded and said basically, thank you, no thank you. So this is not a priority for us right now, which is incredibly disappointing, because we have the vast majority of organisations that are dealing with cats on a daily basis, and or animal welfare organisations, and all of the conservation organisations and the environmental agencies that all support having some central government leadership with some legislation being brought in that protects the welfare of the cats and protects the welfare of our native species.
Yeah, yeah. So
However,
very frustrating.
that doesn't happen yet, so we keep trying.
Very frustrating. Natalie, I mean, it's you know, we've got some bylaws, presumably not very easy to enforce. Those councils are looking for central government leadership. What sort of government leadership are we looking for? Because legislation is one thing, but what is it that we're actually looking for from the legislation? What kind of things will help with promoting that responsible cat guardianship, and obviously allowing cats to coexist alongside all of the other pressing agendas that New Zealand society face?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'd love to be able to just give you a really simple answer to that, Nat. I mean, I think, certainly what we've already talked about, I mean, we want to see national cat legislation, we want to see compulsory microchipping and registration of that microchip, and we want to see desexing. We want to see support of those local governments and their bylaws, and how those bylaws are actually going to be implemented. I think funding is a big part of it. We want to see funding towards supporting those desexing programs. And then I think there really needs to be a big piece on education here. And we've talked about, some of those challenges and some of those perceptions that people have, whether we're talking about desexing or whether we're talking about containment. I don't think, having when I first bought the clinic that we owned, it was right at the time that microchipping became compulsory for dogs. And I remember those conversations, consult after consult with people around why we were microchipping dogs. It wasn't to stop them, biting people. It was to be able to understand, where those dogs were living and how to kind of target some of those repeat offenders. Microchipping is the same. Microchipping is not going to stop cats predating wildlife species. There's a whole host of things that we need to kind of bring in to help protect our native fauna, but the reality is we need to educate the public as to why we want this and why we need this, and also why it is in the interests of cats. Because having been a vet for over 25 years now, cats are an incredibly volatile topic, and just as much as there are passionate cat caregivers in New Zealand and globally, there are people who are so passionate about the impact that they have on wildlife. And I think if we aren't educating people that these moves are in the interest of cats as well as in the interests of communities and on our native population, then we are not going to succeed, with the legislation, but also with the messaging behind it.
Yeah, if I could jump in there, I think I would say that there's also this long game on top of what Arnja and Natalie have been talking about, which are absolutely, is that I think there needs to be sort of a shift across society as a whole to stop thinking about the pets as simply as a pet cat or a companion cat, and that this animal, while it's in our communities, it's a society member. Like it is a member of our society, and it can have negative consequences on the society, and it can have positive consequences on society. And I think we need to start shifting that. But that is definitely a long game in terms of that type of shifting that thinking.
And in fact, that's
I think we've got a long way to go with the behavioural change with cats.
Yes.
Gosia, I feel like we are at least 20 years behind the rest of the world. We have a duty of care to look after our cats.
Yeah, it's in the rest of the world, coming from Canada originally, there's a bonus in the rest of the world that isn't here, is that there's things predating on the cats. So people are much more willing to leave their cats indoors because they're also very aware that a coyote might just snap up your cat overnight, right? So yeah, don't have that issue here.
And a lot of different diseases.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So at the moment, Companion Animals New Zealand's other piece of research is really looking at what good animal citizenship looks like, Gosia. And that study, I think, is looking at a whole range of different stakeholders' opinion on whether or not that's a useful concept.
Yeah, right now, it's been a small pool of stakeholders that we've talked across the range, but seems to be that people are getting a little hung up on the concept, the actual wording of good animal citizenship, which ultimately that's not what we care. If there's another term people want to talk about, that's fine. But people are quite positive about this whole idea. Some people really hadn't thought about it yet, but then when you said that component of the animal is contributing to society, and it's the way that owners and the rest of society behave that ultimately mean, is that a positive or is that a negative contribution? So yeah, we're really excited about that work. We've actually actually the survey closes today, but we've just finished up a survey of the wider public as well to see what their thoughts are, up and beyond the stakeholders that we were discussing with. So yeah.
Oh, so watch this space.
Yes, again, watch this space.
So just really sort of moving towards our kind of last thoughts around this. Obviously, we believe that all animals should have the opportunity to live a good life, and be good animal citizens, or whatever the terminology might be. So I think I'm just going to go to each of you in turn, particularly thinking about these long-ranging conversations that we've just had about cats, and tell us what you believe cats most need to be able to live a good quality of life, and whether we have what's needed in place to be able to inform people about what that looks like, and also obviously make sure that we have the right legislation to be able to support what we believe is the right thing to do. And I'm going to go to Arnja first. She might tell us a little bit about cat welfare and our companion animal codes.
Yeah, I think that actually in New Zealand, whilst we would like every single cat guardian to ensure that that cat has a good life, I think it very much is a bell curve in terms of what our cats are experiencing. And so we have sticks for the bottom of the bell curve under the Animal Welfare Act. If there is, harm, there are offence provisions there. We have these ones at the top that are doing really well and are great. And then we have this big clump in the middle. And I think it's really important that we all work together, which let's be honest, we are all very collaborative around trying to get better welfare outcomes for cats. We need to shift them and bring them forward. But it very much has to be a carrot and stick approach. But we do need to have central government legislation. We do need the government to stand up and take leadership. I have the pleasure of chairing the National Cat Management Strategy Group that was formed in 2014, and we're about to release our third report highlighting all of the issues and handing the government it on a silver platter to say, here is what you need to do. Here are all our organisations, SPCA, the New Zealand Veterinary Association, Companion Animal Veterinarian, Special Interest Branch, CANS, we've got Local Government New Zealand, we've got independent observers with the Department of Conservation and the Ministry for Primary Industries, where we've got Predator Free New Zealand. We've got a wide range of stakeholders that sit around the table and have done now for 10 years. And we have made improvements, and we have got very close to getting it in the past. And then we have, an election, and then priorities change. And so we just keep pushing. We will keep pushing the need for this with funding put into it. And this is something that Natalie mentioned, that it actually needs funding. So we need central legislation that looks after our cats, looks after our wildlife, looks after our farm species, and reduces the spread of toxo and all of that. But we also need funding, because this is a society issue. Gosia talked about cats being part of society. This is a whole society issue. This shouldn't be left to a charity to pick up the pieces, or vets to heavily discount desexing. This is a whole society issue the government has put money up in the past to help desex dogs, particularly if they were on Scheduled 4 list of the Dog Control Act. But now's the time to put up money to help desex the remaining cats. Now, Gosia gave us some really interesting figures that we've got desexing up around 96%. That is great. We still are in a cat crisis. We are still overrun by cats. New Zealand is in epidemic of overpopulation of cats. So these cats are coming from somewhere. These aren't our own cats. Our own cats have got good desexing rate. These are our stray cats. The movable population between the owned, the stray and the feral and back again, this is what we're seeing. And the problem is not going away. And until we actually address this, how can we protect the welfare of these cats, the welfare of our native endangered fauna? It's impossible. We need the government to stand up and actually listen and take action.
Thanks, Arnja. And to Natalie, what about a good life, a good quality of life?
That's a really hard act to follow, Arnja, and I 100% support everything that you have said. So, as you've said, we are a part of that National Cat Management Strategy Group, and we really want to see some leadership in this space. So that would be my first response. And then the second thing to your question, Nat, what do cats need? And there's a really lovely piece of work kind of looking at the 5 pillars of what cats need to live a good life. And I think that's kind of a nice place for me to finish this discussion, because I think it is a really important part of that education. Certainly that piece that we've talked about, that really critical piece of keeping cats contained, is that, we want to know that cats have got a safe place. And certainly we know that if they're contained, they're going to have that safe place. We want to know that they have access to the resources that they need. So if we've got multi-cat households, we need to think about how we're going to manage that, because it is not going to be as easy as providing one litter tray for 3 cats that are suddenly going to live inside. So we need to make sure that they have access, again, to resources that they need. We need to allow them an opportunity to be cats. We need to accept that, the reason why we live with cats is because that predatory behavior that they show is a normal part of being a cat. This is why we have them around us, because we have utilized that behavior over, hundreds and hundreds of years. We can't turn that off. And yes, some cats will express that predatory behavior more so than others, but we need to accept that that is part of being a cat, and we need to provide them outlets for that. So we need lots of toys, we need vertical space for them, and we need to provide them that interaction. And the really nice piece is that what the science is showing us is that we don't need to spend hours at a time playing with our cats. They really only need short, sharp bursts, because we know they spend a whole lot of their day sleeping, and so they don't need hours of interaction. They need to have positive and consistent interaction. In my household, this is a mantra, like when the cat is annoying you, you cannot respond in a different way to when you want to engage with that cat. We need to be thinking about the cats knowing that we're going to respond in a consistent way. And that's why cats love teenage boys, because they love to sleep on the couch, and cats love to sleep on teenage boys who are not doing anything on the couch. And then we just need to think about the fact that, their senses are so much more heightened than ours are. And we need to think about what our households are going to look like when we're keeping them, at home and on laps, because we need to kind of think about the world from a cat's perspective. So I guess for me, outside of that incredibly important work that we're doing as part of the National Cat Management Strategy Group, it's more, I would just love to see this kind of shift towards containment, taking into account all of those needs that cats have. And if we do take that into account and we do kind of understand the world according to a cat, then I think that we're going to have a whole lot more success in that space.
Great, thanks. And Gosia, obviously understanding the world from the cat's point of view is part of Companion Animals New Zealand's research. So do you want to just finish off by telling us briefly about the kind of work that we're doing to try to help owners better understand their cat's behavioral expression?
Yeah, well, basically, like Natalie, you did a better job of what I had hoped to say, but because I think cats are incredibly expressive. We've actually been working with a scientist in the US that showed that cats have 276 facial expressions. You know, even me, and I've had cats all my life, I wouldn't have even thought that before I started participating in this research. But I think what Natalie said is dead on, is that at an in-home level, we need to be much more aware of what the individual cat needs. And what's being really clear, even by what we're doing when we're monitoring the activities of these cats, is some cats are incredibly active, some cats are not active at all. And the way that we respond to that, especially if we're going to be doing things like moving them in and creating a very, very different living environment for them, is also being able to read those read the facial expressions that they're giving us, as well as between cats. And one of our most recent studies, I'm sorry I keep coming back to the studies, but this is a really exciting one, is that one of our most recent studies asked people to look at what cats were basically saying to one another. Was it a positive or was it a negative interaction? And people were very good at picking up on the positive interactions, but pretty bad at picking up the negative interactions. They weren't good at predicting what the outcome of interaction is. And so especially with people that have multi-cats in their households, really getting to know each individual cat and knowing that some cats need time out. Some cats need an area that they can escape from another area. Another cat is going to want to be with you and your family all the time, and it's going to be wanting to play. So I think that's, I mean, it's a very roundabout way of saying, but I think it comes down to, for a cat to have a good life, it needs to have an engaged owner that's willing to really hone in on that individual cat's needs.
That's a great way to end what has been an incredible panel discussion, far better than I could ever have imagined. And so thank you very much indeed to all of you who hopefully will be listening in for following this discussion. And I mean, I think we've had a very insightful and lively discussion ranging around some really important areas when it comes to cat welfare. And I think we've also not been afraid to discuss some of the really significant challenges that face cats in New Zealand, and also the vital role that lots of different stakeholders play in protecting, safeguarding cat welfare. And that goes right the way through from the veterinarians that we just talked about, our welfare organisations, lots of community members that are involved, obviously local government, we're looking for central government leadership, but most importantly, the cat guardian themselves. You know, obviously we've explored what responsible cat guardianship involves in relation to making sure that, you know, that we don't have an overpopulation of cats, and that we also make sure that they're good citizens, and that you know, the ecosystem that they live in is also protected, so that they can coexist harmoniously, really, within the New Zealand society that they are living within. So, just to finish off by saying thank you so much to our wonderful guest panelists. That's Arnja Dale, Natalie Lloyd, and Gosia Zobel. And to all of you, thank you very much for listening. And if you've got any further questions and you need any more information, please feel free to reach out to Companion Animals New Zealand, to our Good Life team, via our welfare email address, which is welfare@companionanimals.nz. Thank you.